And welcome back to America's Voice Live on this Monday. You've probably heard a bit about this. President Joe Biden proposing a massive tax overhaul. And if you have some misguided idea that it's only going to affect those that are, quote unquote, wealthy, I think you've got another thing coming. It would raise corporate taxes and taxes for individuals making over $200,000 a year. Originally, they said $400,000. They said, oh, no, we meant that for a couple. Now it's $200,000. Raising the corporate tax from 21 to 28% and gutting S corporations, which is like the company that I own, one of them, where it flows through. Well, look at that guy. They're making tons of money. No, because an S corp, you take out all of your employees, all of the business expenses. And when you get to the end of the day, this is the sweet spot for small business owners that are going to get hurt here. I am quite convinced. But if I'm wrong, my next guest will tell us. Terry Sawchuk, founder of Sawchuk Wealth. He is in Troy, Michigan today. Terry, good to have you here.
Hey, guys. So, Steve, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
So tell me, I mean, people always have this, well, we're only going to go after the rich. First of all, I don't like the fact that we in America have gotten onto this idea of penalizing those that work hard and are successful and penalizing them in some fashion because that's kind of the way it feels. But let's be honest about how these tax changes are going to affect everyone across the board, including those that can least afford it. What are your thoughts?
Well, when I first saw the Biden tax plan, I thought, it's not as bad as what I expected, but I kind of look at it as a gateway drug, meaning that at some point, the entry is going to be at the $400,000 and then the $1 million. That's where the people are really going to be the biggest target. But I think the big issue is because of what they did with COVID and made such a huge issue out of it, and it turned into an economic issue. They had to pass all the stimulus that they really couldn't do anything with tax increases this year, so it's going to get forced into next year. And, fortunately for us, because next year is an election year, I think we skirted some of the bigger issues. But I think what we're facing, Steve, is two things. We're facing a political party that really wants higher taxes and wants bigger government, but we're also facing a looming debt crisis. And I think that's the snowball rolling downhill that might be unstoppable at this point.
Well, and you touch on that. That's a very important matter. When you get to a debt crisis, for anybody that wants to educate themselves on what that would look like, get out your computer, look up Italy debt crisis from just 3-4 years ago, and you'll see what happens to a country when they get themselves behind the eight ball like that. I've told people this is a possibility. At some point, if the government gets too broke, they'll come and they'll take your 401k or part of it, or your simple IRA or whatever it might be. People say that's not possible, it'll never happen. It happened in Italy. People lost as much as 50% of their retirement savings because the government came along and said, you don't really need that. Mr. Jones down here, he didn't save any money his whole life, so we're going to take this, because that kind of thing is frightening to people that follow the rules, worked hard, saved, didn't squander their money, right? Didn't go down to the bar every 3 days or whatever. You know what I'm saying? They didn't sit on a bar stool all day long. They saved their money, they worked hard, they followed the rules, and they're going to get punished. There's a problem for me.
Well, yeah, and I guess in the big picture, this is the playbook. I mean, countries have gone through these debt crises over centuries, and the playbook is what you end up doing is you start by printing a bunch of money, taking out a bunch of debt, and then it creates political divide because there's a fight over who gets taxed, who doesn't, and then the tax rates become confiscatory, and then after that, you're left with assets that aren't worth as much, and even the government could put prohibitions on the types of assets that you can own, like they did with gold. If you're trying to, let's say, take money out of government bonds, cash, things that are not going to pay very much, and the government is subsidizing their spending by really low interest rates, and you want to put your money somewhere else that might actually pay you more, they could literally stop you from doing that, and they've done this in the past. It wouldn't be the first time.
They certainly have. I want to talk about two of the more regressive taxes that have come up in the discussion that I find completely offensive. I've been through this, by the way. When my father died, the government got a bigger check than anybody that he left anything to, myself included. The government took a huge chunk. Now, I know that the cutoff now is, $11.5 million, something of that magnitude. But the point being is the death tax, the inheritance tax. All it does is destroy small farms. It destroys businesses, because why would you save your money to give your business to your children, your sons and daughters, or whatever it may be, if it's going to get eaten up in taxes anyway? You might as well just spend the money, go buy a boat, do whatever, because there's no point in saving it, because if you do, the government's going to take it away from you anyway, or from your heirs. So that's a terrible tax. And then the Elizabeth Warren wealth tax, another just terrible idea that's based on your holdings, not income, but what your net worth might be. And that would mean taxing businesses and holdings and things that could be invested in capital and in employees and all sorts of things. Am I right or wrong?
Well, that's what she talked about. She talked about putting a 2% tax on people that are worth $50 million or more and a 3% tax on billionaires. Now, look, no one's going to feel sorry for billionaires paying more taxes, but you know what's going to happen? They're going to chase the wealth out of this country. They're going to chase innovation. And they're even with the corporate income tax, going back to that. I mean, raising it from 21 to 28%. That's undoing everything Trump did to bring all of these businesses back into the United States. Talking about creating jobs, talking about expanding the wealth base, and making more millionaires. I mean, these are the things that happened over the last 4 years. And they're just going to undo everything with that if it goes through. And it's frustrating to watch.
And this happens at a time when we just watched Ford Motor Company announce that they're taking a $900 million investment. They're not going to do it in Ohio. They're going to take that south of the border into Mexico. And they've got to be looking at the tax rates going, wait a second, we have to be someplace that is competitive. At 28%, I believe that would put America back above every member of the EU. Ireland's sitting there at 15%. Ireland's a place to go build and do things right now because their tax rate is so low. America will price themselves right out of the market again. And, you don't have to look very far. The genius of Ayn Rand will explain that people that have the ability will leave, period, won't they?
They have the means, right? And so, the United States has the strongest tort laws, we have the strongest economy, we've had what amounts to the strongest currency. So from that standpoint, we don't have to be the lowest. We don't have to be at 15% where Ireland is, but you can't be substantially above the average. You've got to be right in there, or maybe, within 1% or 2% either way. That way you're competitive, and all the other reasons to do business in America stand out, right, and make us competitive. But if you start raising rates back to 28% or higher, which is, I think, where they're going to go. The other thing, Steve, I guess I want to take this one step further. The country that you have to worry about is China, because we're already, so if you look at our government bonds and how little they pay, people that, money goes where it's treated the best. And so money is moving to Chinese bonds. We've got in the United States over $75 trillion of debt assets issued. So think about what happens if a big chunk of that money gets called in because people want to sell their bonds and go get a better rate of return somewhere else. We don't have the cash right now to pay all that back. So what do we have to do? We have to print money. We discount the dollar. We debase our assets. And frankly, from the standpoint of China, that could be a military strategy. I mean, from an economic standpoint, if you don't have as much money, you can't put all that money back into defense like what we did over the last 4 years. So there's some looming issues, and this isn't going to happen overnight, but these are big picture things that we need to be thinking about.
But it could happen overnight. One failed bond sale, and everything changes. One failed bond sale of the United States trying to finance debt, everything could change in a very quick period of time. Our debt is held by China, Germany, Japan, and strangely enough, $10 trillion of those dollars are held internally between departments in the U.S. government. That's for another day. Terry Sawchuk, great conversation. Sawchuk Wealth, Troy, Michigan. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate the time.
My pleasure, Steve. Good chatting. Thank you.